11 minutes past 8 o'clock. It's Thursday morning, May 21st. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Micklin, and thanks for tuning in to KSJE. 90.9 FM over the air here in San Juan County, 103.3 FM over the air in Durango, Colorado, and of course streaming everywhere from our website, ksje.com. Welcome, of course, also to our viewers who are watching this visual radio program, streaming live to the KSJE YouTube channel and Facebook page. We're glad that you are with us, everyone. Coming up this morning, our focus is San Juan County. County Manager Mike Stark is here in the studio with me. Also, Deputy CFO Kim Martin is going to be joining us. We'll be talking about budgets and some other things going on at the county in the next few moments, so stay tuned for that. Next hour right here on KSJE on our YouTube channel and Facebook page. It's our local information program about COVID-19. Today, Megan Cullop, my co-host, and I are speaking with two doctors from San Juan Regional Medical Center, Dr. Aaron Philpott and Dr. Brad Greenberg, about the latest developments on COVID-19. We'll also be talking with a survivor of the coronavirus, a local survivor, and a surprise about a local recent high school graduate and some of the work that he is doing to honor some of our healthcare workers. That is coming up today at 9 a.m. live on YouTube and Facebook. You can hear it again on the radio at 5:06 p.m. right here on KSJE. And also don't forget, it's a rebroadcast on our partner radio station, KNMI Vertical Radio, at noon every day. We appreciate their assistance with that. Mick Hess is going to be on the radio at 9:06 after the news, roving with the arts. Today, Mick is playing music from the great Aaron Copland, the fanfare for the common man, just one of the pieces you'll hear today at 9:06 on Roving with the Arts. In addition to Facebook and YouTube, of course, we invite you to follow us on Twitter and connect with KSJE on Instagram as well. Here's a weather forecast. Mostly sunny skies, a bit warmer today than yesterday. The high 74 in Farmington today. Still clear and cold overnight, so watch the outdoor plants, right? 36 for a low in town. 81 and sunny tomorrow. It'll be partly sunny and 77 on Saturday, 74 on Sunday, and 73 with sunshine on Monday before we hit back into the 80s and 90s for the second half of next week. Well, let me turn to my guests who are here with me this morning here in Studio A. Mike Stark is here, San Juan County Manager. Good morning.
Good morning, Scott.
Thank you for being here.
You bet. Good to see your bright, smiling face.
And you too. I mean, very few of my guests come to the studio anymore, so I appreciate you being here. And we are physically distancing ourselves. I just want everyone to know. So,
yeah, more than 6 feet.
Exactly. And our other guest is also physically distant, too, from both of us. So
yes.
She's staying away from both of us. And there you go. I don't know what that means.
She's almost out in the hallway.
Almost out in the hallway. Kim Martin is here, Deputy CFO. Kim, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us as well.
You betcha.
Appreciate you coming in and keeping your distance, like
Yes,
we all are. So
most
we're
definitely.
in 3 corners of the studio this morning, and that's okay. Well, let me start with you, Mike Stark, a little bit about some of the news we heard. I think just yesterday it was announced about some of the COVID-19 cases at the detention centers, plural, in San Juan County. The county's done a lot of testing to kind of get a handle on what the situation is, and the results, I think, were fairly, I was going to say fairly positive, but I don't want to say positive because that's a bad thing. Fairly good news
That's
for
right.
the county. And so we could talk about that just briefly, right?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that up. We did. We worked collaboratively with the Department of Health to have all 3 detention facilities tested, both staff and detainees, our juvenile services facility, our alternative sentencing facility, and then the adult detention center. And yes, we are happy to report that juvenile services and alternative sentencing, both staff and detainees, all tested negative. Staff at the adult detention center tested negative. We did have 7 detainees, 4 males, 3 females, test positive, and then 1 contract employee that tested positive. But rest assured, and the public should rest assured that we've had all the proper practices and protocols in place. Actually, since the beginning of March, we've been taking temperature checks of all employees coming into the facility, detainees coming into the facility. And then of course, upon the results of the folks that were positive, we were able to isolate and quarantine folks in our medical unit where we have negative airflow cells. And to make certain that those folks, we'll monitor them for signs and symptoms and make sure that they, if they need to, I mean, right now 7 of the 8 were asymptomatic, and so
Interesting.
So we're going to still monitor them and hope that the disease doesn't progress and that they make a full recovery.
Right. And, of course, the testing continues, does it not? You're continuing to have testing of your inmates and staff just to make sure the numbers stay where they are, or to know if anyone else becomes sick?
It does continue, and that's the benefit of having the additional tests made available statewide. So now we'll have test swabs available for every detainee entering the facility. They'll be tested upon entering. We had already put the practice in place of a 14-day quarantine holding area to monitor for signs and symptoms, and so that still will remain in practice for all three facilities. But no, that's going to be very helpful for us now to truly know who's coming into the facility and if they have COVID-19.
Right. And, of course, across our state, we have seen other facilities that don't have such positive and good results as San Juan County. And so I think it's important to note that even though our county is one of the hot spots in our state, our detention facilities don't seem to be at the same rate as others are in the other parts of the state.
That's correct. And we were very concerned early on the onset of COVID-19 that, we want to make certain we're keeping our staff and our detainees safe. And so kudos to our staff, county staff, kudos to our contract medical staff that have put the right practices and protocols in place and have followed them, and making sure that we're keeping folks safe and the facility COVID free, because you have the real potential to have that spread throughout a congregate facility like that and have some real issues. And I also want to thank our judicial partners. I want to thank law enforcement. Our population through time, just a month and a half ago, was at 550 at the detention center. We're in the 280 range as of today. And so that's a collective effort of everyone and trying to minimize where it makes sense. Still want to protect the public, and not everyone's eligible for some type of a release, but where it makes sense, let's reduce the population at the jail so that we can manage the facility better and manage the potential spread of COVID.
So the judges are working with you, I guess, then, to maybe not sentence everyone to spend time at the detention facility, depending on what the case is, I guess is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's a case-by-case basis, and they do that by right today anyway, as it relates to kind of the bail reform that's taken place over the last couple of years, but now a little more sensitive to reviewing each case a little closer and seeing if there's a need to have an individual detained. Could they be placed with other conditions on them? Law enforcement, could they issue a summons instead of having to bring somebody to jail? And so those are the different conditions that are being evaluated every time they've got an arrest in the community and someone that may have the need to be placed in jail. So that all those things have helped. Obviously, the good practices of our employees, our medical staff oversight. It's a collective effort, and like I said, we feel like the results that we received were very positive.
Right. Well, and again, you only need to look as far as some of the other jails and detention facilities in our state, and also maybe even some of the nursing homes in our own community, to see how this can spread if you're not careful.
Yep.
And so, so appreciate the update. Thank you for that.
You bet.
And I also want to talk about budget, because I think a story in the paper this morning, the Daily Times, shout out to them, that the County Commission has approved the tentative fiscal year 2021 budget. And that's why Kim is here as well, to keep us straight on all the numbers. But this is looking a little, I don't want to say scary, but it's certainly going to be different from this year's budget because of the conditions, right?
Absolutely. We hear this word a lot, unprecedented times. But I don't know of any other word that really better describes what we're dealing with. Having been with the county since 2006 and being through a number of different budget cycles, this is truly unprecedented to not have a good handle on what our streams of revenue are going to look like for next year. And then ultimately, the programs and services that we offer to the community, what are those going to look like for the next fiscal year? And
the cynic in me would say you're probably getting a lot of practice at being able to look at these budgets to figure out how to do more with less.
Well, no, and that's been helpful for us, quite frankly. And you're exactly right. Going back the last 10 years, fairly austere type budgets and economic challenges here locally that we've been working through collectively as a community, that we've had to figure out how to do more with less. we've been trying to get our organization as a whole as lean and mean as possible, so that we did hit what we thought would be the consequences of other economic challenges, that we'd be ready to face those as the local county government providing services to the citizens. And that actually has been helpful, quite frankly, Scott, because we had cash reserves above and beyond the state's requirement in place. We've been through time cutting operating costs, evaluating contracts, evaluating positions that become vacant, and really saying, hey, can we do without this position, or could we even, in some cases, we've been job sharing across departments, trying to get as creative as possible in trying to set us up to where we can overcome an economic challenge, or now a pandemic, and what the economic impact may be to our local community, and ultimately those revenues that flow to us. At the end of the day, if it takes our local businesses, our local economy to be successful, then local government will have resources necessary to provide what we need to the citizens. And so there's concern, obviously, with COVID-19 and its impact on a lot of the small businesses, and some of the revenue challenges that may exist there. Gross receipts tax is one of it is the largest source of revenue into the county budget, which is unusual for a lot of counties. Generally, property tax is the largest source of revenue, but roughly for us, it's about 40% of the total revenue. A little different from the municipalities. They depend on a lot larger percentage of income from GRT, anywhere upwards from 70 to 75%. But nonetheless, for us, it's concerning, because we just don't know right now what type of impact. If you've seen some businesses that are closed, some of those businesses, unfortunately, will never reopen. They may not be able to overcome, even with the PPP loans, some of the stimulus checks that have gone out, that may not keep a business operating, and we're concerned about all of our small local businesses. Compare and contrast that to the big box stores, who, in some cases, they're open. They've been deemed essential, and just by anecdotally, numbers have been provided to me are doing quite well year over year.
I think we heard a report this week about maybe Walmart's first quarter. Not too shabby. Not too shabby.
They're grocery stores.
Yes.
Same situation. So the question's going to be, and of course that's the very cloudy crystal ball that we're trying to read into as we're projecting our budget for next year. And number one on the list is, what do revenues look like?
Right.
And so that's the big concern. Will the sales from those businesses that have been deemed essential and are operating, will that in some way help to level off the sales that have been lost in our community, and may never come back to the full potential of where they were at?
Sure. Well, at least not right away.
No,
maybe.
no.
We know that but when we reopen, there's going to be a gradual reopening of stores and gatherings and things like that, and so the increases may be gradual as well.
Yeah.
Let me ask Kim Martin to come into the conversation here a little bit about some of that revenue you were talking about, Mike Stark. And Kim, from what we've seen since all this started in March, is there any predictions? Is there enough data to show you maybe what to plan for in 2021 if things don't radically change, I guess, in the next couple of months?
Yeah, so kind of what our CFSO, Jim Cox, had done is he put together all of the industries from the state, GRT, pulled it together, and then he sent it out for an independent panel to determine how much they felt that what they felt, how it would impact the revenues, and where they would see potential declines or increases. And whenever that was completed, we wound up coming back with about a 15.6% reduction in GRT going into FY21. So that's,
that, as Mike Stark said, is 40% of the county's revenue.
Yes.
So sounds to me like a big drop, and
Yeah.
I'm not even a financial person. But
Exactly.
Even I can figure that out.
Exactly.
And then I think the story in the newspaper was saying that we saw a little bit of a bump in March with GRT. Is that something that you saw?
Yes, we did. We figured that it was due to all of the extra buying in preparation for the shutdown, the hoarding and whatnot. So
That's a lot of toilet paper.
That is a lot of toilet paper.
well, when you see that Sam's Club has nothing, you're kind
I
of
guess
knowing
so.
that.
That's where it went.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So that would be what caused that, but then it came back down again and below normal levels more recently, or you're waiting for those numbers?
We're waiting for those numbers. June and July will be a true picture as to how bad the COVID-19 shutdown has impacted our economy.
Got you. And so, so for both of you to answer this question, how do you build a budget with all these question marks? I mean, you can't do Excel doesn't like question marks. I figured that out.
It does
quite
not.
away. But how do you do? I mean, you've got a plan A, plan B, maybe,
You
or
bet.
a couple of different budgets that you can pull off the shelf if you need to.
Absolutely. We actually submitted 5 different budget scenarios to five different budget scenarios to our commission, and what the cuts would look like, ranging from a GRT anticipated loss of 10% all the way up to 30%. And ultimately, where we ended up with, as Kim mentioned, is the 15.6% number, which kind of fell in between level 1 and level 2. But we do have the contingency plans in place, and I'm happy to report that the interim budget is a balanced budget. It's a balanced budget that funds the capital needs within the county. It provides no cuts or services to programs at this point to the community. But as we start to see revenues come in, and of course, gross receipts tax is reported 2 months in arrears. So as Kim indicated, our May receipts that we recently received are reflecting March activity.
Right.
June will be April, and then July, May. We're going to be analyzing that monthly. And this budget season is unlike any other, once again, because normally in years and still, you still need a crystal ball. You never quite know where things are going to come in. But you have a pretty good guess, and you make minor adjustments through the year, and we do that via budget adjustments monthly, as we have revenues that come in a little less or a little above. But this will be a time where we're obviously looking at those reports on a monthly basis very closely, and then having to make operational changes on the fly potentially. But we have those potential next steps ready to go. None are real favorable. I'll be honest with you. The next steps would involve the cutting of potential programs and services, or reducing the level of service in some cases, as a matter of being able to balance the budget. And of course, behind that service or program are people, our employees. And so when you're saying we're going to cut programs or services, what you're really saying is we'd be looking at, in some form or fashion, cutting employees, if that's a furlough or a reduction in pay or the worst case scenario, a layoff.
Right.
And we're doing everything we can to avoid that, because we don't want to continue to add to the economic losses here. And more importantly, our citizens are depending on us in this time of need. I mean, our frontline heroes at the county that are out every day, law enforcement and fire, emergency management, we need those folks out providing the services to our community. And so those are going to be the difficult potential decisions ahead, depending upon how things come out. So the good news is the first month turned out to be okay, $60,000 above budgeted revenue. So
That won't carry you over the year, though.
that will
Very long.
that will not carry us over the year when you're talking a $123 million budget.
Yeah, but it's nice to have in the bank and
Yep.
and to see it from time to time. I completely understand that. So the budget that was accepted this week would be, as you mentioned, reduced numbers, and part of that is just, again, you're going to have less county employees next year than you had this year, and that's because of attrition or retirements and things like that, and that's allowed you to save some of this without going to that other extreme.
We had to balance our budget to meet the level. I call it level 1.5. It's
Okay.
in between 1 and
Right.
2
Right.
cuts. So that involved using operational cuts first and foremost of over 3.5% in the entire budget, which that included 19 positions that were frozen. So as soon as this crisis hit, it became apparent to me and our finance team that we need to be preparing for not just the remainder of the fiscal year, but into next fiscal year. And so immediately put a freeze on all non-public safety hiring first part of March, all public safety hirings on a case-by-case basis. And so the net result of that through retirements, as you mentioned, that have taken place, as well as positions that we were able to freeze. For example, at our detention center, because of the reduced population, we were able to freeze 8 detention officer positions because with less detainees, we have a lower need for mandatory posts. And the other piece that's important is the courts have had to change their business model, and so we're not transporting folks from the detention center to the courts. And so that freed up resources to be used within the facility, transport officers that now can be used as detention officers within the facility. So those kind of operational changes we've been making since the first part of March, and we'll continue to make. We're evaluating all the programs and services. We have been, as you mentioned earlier, really for the last 10 years, and just making sure that we're still providing the services that our community are desirous of, and that we're providing the return on investment that they're desirous of. By no means are we gonna cut valued services, but yes, if we can make operational changes to accommodate this, we have. We've also been able to use, because of good budgeting practices, cash reserves to help provide this kind of interim fix. But those are one-time sources.
I was just going to say, you can't go back to that account every time. You need a little extra, right?
You can. And so we know, I mean, if there's ever a time you'd want to be able to rely on cash reserves, it would be during a crisis like this. And because of prudent budgeting and management of all of our elected offices and department heads, we're in a position where we can lean on those. And so yeah, it's a number of things that have allowed us to solve for the general fund, which is the fund that provides the majority of resources for our various departments and elected offices. It's about a $4.3 million shortfall that we covered within the interim budget through all those different mechanisms that I mentioned.
That sounds significant to me.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money, but yeah, it's been a collective effort through time to get there, and we have a very fiscally conservative commission, and that's why we're able to be in the position that we're at and not have to make, at least at this point, any radical or rash decisions. And so we can really allow to see where revenues are going to come in over time. And then, there may be more difficult decisions ahead. I hope not. Right. I hope that the unknowns of how stimulus checks will affect our economy, the PPP loans that businesses have received, and if that helps them weather the storm till they can, get back to normal operations,
right.
Or semi-normal operations. And then any stimulus we might see. Our budget was not based on any federal government stimulus. There's discussion that, as we mentioned before the show, CARES Act to provide economic stimulus, relief stimulus to
local
to the
governments,
states
right?
and local governments,
cities and counties.
Versus
perhaps.
Today, the dollars that are available are just for the recovery efforts.
Sure. And that brings me to my next line of questions for both of you, which would be the special session that we know is coming up in Santa Fe. The governor has said that she's going to call a special session. I think we have a date, June 18th?
June 18th, as of yesterday.
Is the date that the governor said she's going to do that, which I think everybody understands the reason for that, because the budget they passed in early spring, late winter, has probably got several holes blown in it because of all of this, and so they need to go back and check that our state is facing some deficit spending and things like that if they don't change the budget that was accepted, because it's a whole different world after March as it was before March. And so what do you think is going to happen out of that? Do you have any idea what's going to happen from the special session, of how that will impact San Juan County?
Well, I do. The state.
But you're not smiling.
I'm not smiling because I know in previous budget shortfalls at the state level, it generally hasn't resulted in that being a pleasant experience for local governments. A lot of that pain was pushed down to the local level with hold harmless and other.
Some of those changes that we saw from those, right? I understand.
Have been done in the past, so
right.
I'll hold my breath until we see how that all shakes out. But the state's actually started looking at a lot of capital outlay dollars that had, because of the surplus and oil and gas revenues that hit the state budget. They are closely looking at how they can pull back grants, specifically ones right now that have no expenditures. The good news for us is that we, at this point, had all of our grants encumbered with some form of an expenditure. We were concerned about the $1 million grant for the film studio going back to last fiscal year.
Right.
Those are specifically the ones they're targeting that were general fund appropriations, because they can pull those back in and use those for their general operations.
But the county had made a deal for some property and things like that, isn't that?
We
part of
did.
where we
Yeah,
are?
we
So
did. We're
some of that's
we've
been spent.
encumbered about $350,000 to $400,000 of that grant.
Okay.
So that we've, at this point, the state is indicating they're not going to pull back any grants that had activity. And they're also, at this point, not going to pull back any grants that were severance tax bond related, where they're issuing debt. And all of the grants that we received this year were all severance tax bond grants. So that's one area in which the state is looking. But they're going to have to look, obviously, in a lot of different areas when you're trying to cover a potential $2 billion shortfall.
Which is what they're saying at the state level.
What they're saying.
Correct.
We've been pushing as a solution that doesn't increase taxes. It just speeds up the timeline in terms of receipts to local governments. I guess it was a year ago, the legislature took action on allowing local governments to capture the local GRT increments on internet sales. But the state needed 2 years because of all the work that needs to be done in changing the system that the state has today, which is a GRT based on a location versus based on a point of delivery.
I see.
And so that was supposed to go into effect, and still is, July 1st of 2021. One of the suggestions and recommendations we've made to our local legislators and those at the state is to push that timeline up, potentially January 1st of this upcoming year. Ideally, we'd like to see July 1st of this year.
Right.
But we don't know if that's practical and feasible. But that would be helpful to us. There was a lot of internet sales leakage before this pandemic.
Sure.
There's a whole lot more internet sales leakage, which doesn't help when you're funding a large percentage of your local government on the collection of gross receipts tax. And folks, I understand why they'd make the decision to use the internet to procure goods,
right.
To avoid having to go out into public and
Sure.
in public spaces. But then those are dollars that are only captured by the state. The state today is capturing the 5.125% on internet sales. There's just not the local government increments that the cities and the counties depend on to help fund operations.
And that's interesting because I don't know if a lot of folks realize how much that would add up to revenue for San Juan County. Do we have any numbers on how much is lost for that percentage of internet sales that's done?
Prior to this, a lot of estimates from retailer associations, et cetera, that it was in the 20 to 25% range. I could see that number being anywhere from 25 to 50% now. I mean, survey anybody that you know, friends, family.
I know.
Ask them,
Right.
how
much
do
do
you
you
do
spend?
your shopping and how much do you spend online versus in town? Generally, when I'm talking to folks at the county and around town, it seems to be about a 50-50 split. It may be higher in other households. I don't know.
Right.
Kim, what do you think?
Yeah, probably. I know that my family definitely uses the internet a lot. And,
Right. But
especially
even
since
that
the-
small percentage on every dollar, that would add up to significant amount of revenue
Oh,
for
yeah.
the county?
Oh, yes.
What are we talking, tens of thousands?
Probably.
What do you think?
Well, we haven't done the full analysis, but we've had done the full analysis. I just don't have it here.
I know. I'm putting you on the spot. I apologize. I understand.
Appreciate that, Scott.
Yeah,
Thanks.
you're welcome.
But
it would
no,
be
it's
significant.
significant. It's significant
That's the
when you're
point.
talking about the volume of sales that flow through the internet and used to flow through our economy.
Right.
And that's the big question for citizens, and that's a question that our commission struggles with. How do folks want to fund government? Generally speaking, the decision has been made here locally because we're in a trade area of 300,000 people. That folks that come from elsewhere to purchase, as we know, essential goods and services from around the area,
They help fund a lot of our services that we enjoy from
They
government.
do. They help you. They use a lot of services too when they're calling
Yes.
the fire department and the ambulance, which are all funded through gross receipts tax. But that has been the decision here locally: is let's fund government as much as we can through gross receipts tax versus property tax, and just affecting it's only 6% of the land, 6.5% of the land in San Juan County is privately owned.
Right.
So you're disproportionately affecting that smaller group of folks. So let's do it through the broader group of folks that are coming into the area to use services here.
Right. And again, if they're not buying it locally in a brick and mortar store, but they're buying it online, that gross receipts tax is being captured at the state level and doesn't quite trickle down yet to county and city governments, but hopefully that may change.
That's our hope,
With
and
this
that's our
special session.
request and recommendation to
We'll
the
see.
state.
Okay. Very good. Well, I'm afraid we're out of time this morning, everybody, but I appreciate you being here. Kim Martin, thank you for coming in and
Thank you.
sharing your expertise with us. Good luck with the budgets and the spreadsheets and everything else that I know you'll be dealing with here as the new fiscal year starts July 1. Mike Stark, thank you for sharing the information with us about the detention center and the budgets, and we hope everyone stays healthy in all those places and at the
Absolutely.
county offices as well.
And
both
Scott,
of you.
and if I could, just a shout out to all of our frontline caregivers
Indeed.
and essential workers throughout the community. Those that work at the county, those that work broadly in the private sector, in grocery stores and elsewhere. I just want to say thank you for your service and sacrifice during this time, and thank you too, Scott, to you and Megan and the job you're doing to help keep our community informed. It's very much appreciated and valued. I want you to know that.
Well, thank you for saying that. We're glad to be here as a community station and a community service. So that's why we're on the air Monday through Thursday at 9 to talk about local information, the keyword local, as I keep telling everybody. So thanks
right.
for that. Good to see you both. Thanks for being here. My guests
you.
from San Juan County this morning on KSJE, and I'll be back with more in just a moment, everyone. The time is coming up on 8:42.
It's one thing if manufacturers